it's kind of a different vibe. You know, like they're like spectators now. Maybe they're like throwing things at the screen, or you know.
Are they seeing us right now?
No, I don't think so, because they're using the YouTube. They're using the YouTube link, so they're still
Okay.
not aware of our ghostly presence. Sí, está esperando. Joel tiene que hacer un nuevo vínculo de YouTube. Algo pasó con el que estaba programado. Está haciendo un nuevo vínculo y yo creo que se los manda en un minuto o dos a ustedes. Me parece que les va a mandar otro enlace. Puede llegar a tu compu directo, ¿no? Bueno, no sé. Eso ya más bien.
Ya lo recibí. Gracias.
A ti.
So we are ready when you are ready.
Okay, we're live. We're going. Good. Buenas noches a todos. Bienvenidos a un miércoles más, un miércoles de SOMA. Ahora estamos transmitiendo desde Tlaxcala. Estamos en el primer miércoles de SOMA, que es parte del programa de SOMA Summer de este año, el cual yo dirijo. Mi nombre es Ricardo Alzate, para quienes no me conozcan. Y el título de este programa es un fantasma y un espíritu entran a un bar y nadie se da cuenta. Uno de nuestros primeros invitados en este programa es Houman Harouni, con quien ya tuvimos una sesión por la mañana en nuestro pequeño grupo. Y ahora, como parte del programa público, pues va a compartir con nosotros un aspecto de su trabajo. El programa se conduce normalmente en inglés, entonces en este momento tengo que cambiar de idioma y recurrir al idioma inglés para comunicarnos. Espero que lo disfruten y voy a leer una breve reseña biográfica. Houman Harouni was born in Tehran, Iran in 1982 and migrated as a refugee to the United States in 1997. His father was, for a time, a professional revolutionary, and his mother, for a time, a sociologist of revolution. He is a theorist of cultural transformation. His work moves across philosophy, political economy, history of science, psychology, theater, and literature, culminating in his pedagogy of active theory, which he has taught at the Harvard Graduate School of Education since 2015. His academic and journalistic writings have appeared in a wide array of publications, including The Guardian, PBS Frontline, The White Review, and the Harvard Educational Review. He has been awarded fellowships at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the National Academy of Education. On Revolutionary Times is Harouni's first collection of poems. And I just wanted to say, I'm really, really grateful and thankful for Harouni's time and generosity. And with not much to say, I will give you the floor, my friend. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. I hear that the main body of audience tonight are gathered in a room and they're drinking. I want to apologize for not being able to join you in person, but I'm joining you in spirit and very much envying your presence. I'm going to minimize my image, in part because, frankly, when I go to readings, I have a very hard time following what the person says. I'm captivated usually by the faces of the writers. They're usually beautiful people and they have amazing voices, so it's easy to follow them. I have neither of the two virtues, and so I think I'm going to allow for the words to take the main part of the screen. And hopefully that would help you follow with me for a little while. Give me one moment, and here we are. I wrote this volume on revolutionary times over a number of years, but it came out in March of 2022. Its title turned out to be a bit of a joke that God played on me, because in September of that time, a real revolution started in Iran, which is not the entire grounding, but part of the grounding of some of these writings. I had divided the book into a series of figures who were trying to live their lives according to the mandates of the heart or the soul or the revolution in times that were not so. And so the worker, the dervish, the friend, the traveler, the father and the son, the fugitive and the militant and the seducer, all these figures appeared at a particular time, which is usually the longer stretch of our era. Once this was done, I found myself very soon in that uprising that is known now as the Woman Life Freedom Uprising. And I was consumed by it, which I think was right. And in that consumption, I wrote a number of poems, which was some days the only thing I could do. Some days I could do better. Tonight, for the first time, I'm going to read some of these poems out loud. I hope I do a good job. I'm going to go back and forth between the poems of the unrevolutionary times and the poems from the revolutionary times. And my hope is that as I go through them, I can do some honor to the tension and the stretch that exists in each of us in times like these. I don't know what kind of times they are, and I'm hoping that the reading is going to help me think a little bit about it and maybe feel my way through it. The first poem that I read is actually from the collection. It's the opening poem. It's what sets it up. And then I'm going to switch back and forth between the two times. It's titled, If It's Revolution. If it's revolution, then it comes for you when you are 5. It becomes the game that surrounds your games. At 7, it says, call me history. You don't know me now, but if you brush your teeth and learn your letters, one day you will. At 9, you study the faces of the dead, how they grimace from the war within them. And at 11, it teaches you poetry. One day it says you will be magic. The women in storybooks will know your name. By 12, revolution wants you to learn the city walls. You look into the eyes of the poor. Together, you memorize the walls. You take your first hill, scream with joy. Tell your teachers to go fuck themselves. You are the storm. Until you look up, see you are alone. At 13, revolution rips your home away and you give it willingly because you want to live in revolution. But at 15, in exile, it is more homeless than you. Don't be confused, it says. I dwell in dejection. You believe what it says. You become ready to betray the cause. It has already betrayed you. Refuse to make you tall and lyric and true. The voices you need, it will not find for you. So you go to sleep. You are 17 now. Revolution prefers you unawake. Refuses to send you a friend or a guide. Refuses you joy. So that at 21, when you finally wake up, everything aches. You have atrophied, soured. To wake up, you say, is the new revolution. You seek doctors and then witch doctors who turn your body into a bow, aim your soul at the second sun, the one yet to rise. You preach, this too is revolution. Only those who do not create the world are alone. By 23, the witchcraft is in you. You read minds, and the ones you want, they chase you. Drinking, you do not become drunk. You guess the secret names of strangers. You are a sword swallower, a party trick, no warrior now. So you lay down all your petty powers to go find revolution again. The slogans, like the loving hands of a mother, release you. You slowly learn to speak for the first time. Everything is a thread, and you can tighten with dolls dancing in musical response. It's thrilling. At 26, revolution says, it's really okay if you want to have a life, but you learn how empty the comfort, the con. Every habitat proves you wrong. First your own flesh, then the flesh of others. First other geographies, then your own. But the sky too is wrong. In its heart you flail. In your 29th year, those you have touched conspired to give you a job. It's not as if they know revolution beyond the tiny fear you inspire. And you see that revolution is more alone than you. You are its mother, and you survive on this arrogance. You are the last underground paper, the pamphlet hidden so deep in secret compartments you can't find yourself. You always knew that it all depended on you, but now you know that it all depends on you. And revolution is beginning to take on your looks, your voice, and it is sturdy with white patches of hair. What can you do? You want to hear revolution, so you begin to teach. It means you listen. You are a little lighter at parties. Wine rediscovers you. The girls you wanted when you were 19 now come naked to your room. You are poor, living in a no-room flat. But so is revolution. It's hard to keep friends. Should I mention you have lost your parents? At 35, you look down. It's the paper hat you made when you were 10, pretending to soldier. You look at it astonished, then look up to see how little has changed. The slave auction is right around the block. So we can still lose our way, you turn to say to revolution, who is busy like everyone else, doing ads, rushing to class, reading these lines. You grab it by the collar, nose to nose, you see how old it's become, how frail. You shake him, look, motherfucker, look over there, the stars. Speak the stars. You are the only one who can. Anyway, it doesn't have to be like this, in this very order. But if it's not, then it's not what I call revolution. Now, it was imagine having written that and having made it up, in a sense. You have meant it. And then comes it was September 16, 2022, when Mahsa Jina Amini was killed. She had been kidnapped for doing nothing other than walking around, being herself. She had been kidnapped by people whose job supposedly it was to protect her. She had been beaten. She succumbed a few days later in the hospital. Her family were under extraordinary pressure to hide the fact. Threats of all kinds were leveled against them. And they refused to do so. And this refusal from the family was the first spark of the rebellion. September 17, 2022, in the Kurdish city of Saqqez, Mahsa Amini's body was laid to rest. I will play for you a little recording of the funeral, so that maybe I can give you a sense of what kind of sounds were going in my head round and round when I began to write the next poem. Some women have taken off their head coverings, which will, in a little bit of time, become the signal act of the rebellion. You hear someone trying to find the right words, and then the crowd settles, and his voice also settles with them on the simplest of poems. مرگ بر دیکتاتور, death to the dictator. That simplicity was in my mind, and the images of this funeral. I won't play for you. I won't play for you the image of Mahsa's mother at the grave, but I watched it and I watched it again. I talked to people who were there. I read every report that I could. And what has been gathered by coincidence in this next poem, all the lines that are spoken are lines that were spoken at that event. Qasida for Saqez. The sky is ill. Today should have rained flowers. The earth unfurls its robe, gathers nothing but dust and a horde of faces, gray and somber. Heat of September in the Kurdish valley tries to char the bones. They grow colder. Eyes sew themselves to the cadaver like she is water. No one looks to heavens, not for rain. Not any longer. The body rests on a river of bodies. The current surges in quiet anger. But in that black center, the immense wailing of a single voice, the nails gashing the face, an unbearable sound growing louder. Someone holds her arm. Mother, mother, mother. Sentence without end. Who can console her? She herself completes it all with a shriek. I have no daughter. The center is forever still. The crowd shudders. Just a few thousand. What can so few hands gather against those whose God is murder? On a hidden roof, a gun is already cocked. They gather the emptiness, fists into the air. Marg bar, marg bar. The fists rise higher, marg bar, marg bar. I wish my arm could blast out of shoulder. They have stood here before. She's not the first, even if in innocence she looks like Eve's daughter, the first unnamed sister. All these shouting amounts to a whimper. Were we born on earth to become mourners? Cease the slogans, powerless to arrest the fall of despair. The river of bodies has reached the abyss. Lay her inside, falter. By the graveside, only the sound of a few sparrows. Do they summon winter? And the words, the wails of the woman, Jinagian, wake up. People have come to see you, my daughter, breath of my breath, my broken flower. She crushes a rose in her hand, scatters dust. on her hair. Who can console the distant? All that was close has receded farther. We will not surrender. We will not bow our heads. Who is speaking? Her uncle? Her father? He is the one they had to carry, back broken, his feet furrowed the earth where they dragged him. Do not abandon us. Do not let them harm us. Voices multiply, strangers, neighbors. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, they answer. The words do not arrest the fall of horror. They know what he means better than their own hearts. But in that silence, an old man's murmur. Tehran has forced a veil on trees. It has made of life a sepulchre. The words of Sherku, his name meant courage. He who speaks them is the grandfather. The trembling voice raises in the poet's words a mountain of danger. Deep in the abyss, deep in the furrows, in the sky that now seems one open hand higher, in the blood-filled chambers behind the cage of bones where fear has its soil, a seed is thrown. It opens as whisper and greens on the tongue, and whoever speaks it is one with her body. Cannons, tanks, machine guns have lost their power. Tell my mother she has no son. She has no daughter. Speak these words. Arrest the fall of sounds. What is this murmur rising to choke the crowd? What is the name of this back-broken anger? Already far distances are drawing closer. Everything tightens around the black core. Speak these words before you are no more. Stay the rush of sight. Be all and surround her. I will read the next one from one of the figures in the book on revolutionary times. And I put it here because it stands in contrast with this previous poem that is full of heroes but doesn't have any figures. It has symbols, and symbols are aspects of ourselves that have been extended. We recognize them easily, but a figure we don't recognize so easily. When they walk around us, very often we confuse them with something else. And this one, this first figure is the dervish. Now, fortunately, this particular poem has been translated by the wonderful Venezuelan poet Nidia Hernandez. And I will play it first in her voice and in her translation, which even with my broken Spanish, I understand is an improvement on the original.
El derviche. Las posturas en las que mantuve largas respiraciones por el flujo del Ganges, no las sostuve para alcanzar la luz. No tenía ninguna estrella a la vista mientras convertía mi cuerpo en un arco. Si recé en mi pequeño apartamento americano, donde cada superficie miraba mis labios con desprecio, no recé por justicia, sino para que la voz de este extraño se escurriera de mí. El arte de la guerra, el camino del monje, todos los pilares de la sabiduría yacen sumergidos en el frágil frío del tiempo, y la corriente arrastra sus restos al pequeño recinto de una última alma impaciente. Estas líneas profanas que tallé en los muros de tu ciudad no se atrevieron a esperar profundizar en tu amor, solo disminuir la distancia entre un nombre y otro. De este modo, el derviche ha honrado los errores de su vida.
The dervish. The postures I held for long breath by the flow of the Ganges, I did not hold to achieve light. I held no star in sight as I turned my body into a bow. If I prayed in my small American flat where every surface eyed my lips with contempt, I did not pray for justice, but for this stranger's voice to drain from me. The art of war, the way of the monk, all the pillars of wisdom lie submerged in the brittle cold of time, and the current pulls their remnants into the small enclosure of one last impatient soul. These profane lines I carve into the walls of your city did not dare hope to deepen your love, but only to lessen the distance between one name and another. In this way, the dervish has honored the mistakes of his life. When I read this one, I recognize that I'm walking a little bit even ahead of myself, because every time I read it, there are lines that I get to that I don't understand. I understand them, but I'm not entirely certain of the meaning, and the meaning changes. But in the previous poem, I am not only walking behind myself, I'm walking behind an entire crowd of people whose specificity does not have to be spectacular. They are precious and important for the simple fact that they choose to be present, and they choose to scream that presence in the face of danger. I will read another poem that will maybe demonstrate this. Maybe demonstrate something, but maybe it will demonstrate that too. It's again from one of the figures of On Revolutionary Times, The Traveler. And it begins with a line from Velimir Chlebnikov, who was himself torn between revolution and what is not revolution, onto his death. And the line which he uses to refer to his favorite figure, Golmola, is "One of us," said the mountain. "One of us," said the sea. He is not of the mountains nor of the sea. Cities bear no claim to him. Even the road does not recognize his coming and leaving. Not even words, names go through him like wind through a promise. Though we send our armies of lovers to compass him, though we look for him in our dreams, he vanishes like the walking man in the pedestrian light. He is refusal. If you examine your palm for the lines that lead to him, emptiness will stare you back. He is arrival. He comes when our searchers have receded, when objects know us better than we know our own kin. How tired we look, we who vowed to live until the very end. How easily the weekend returns us to the week, 5 back to 9. No, do not sift your hours. Wake with the alarm if you must. Had he not smelled like firewood, you would not even know he had passed through. Had he not leaned to you as you spoke, returning your loss as a gift, if he did not care to say in his casual voice, "I am the one who made your mother, your father, your mother too." Come to, look around, remember where you are. It's fine, you did not follow him, but your footsteps trail him through streets and waters and lands that do not recognize you. September 20th, 2022, Nikah Shakarami. She was only 16. is abducted from one of the protests. Her body is later on found. The government declares that she committed suicide. They arrest her aunt and her uncle to force them to admit on television that this had in fact been a suicide. They held out as much as they could. And once again, that refusal creates a symbol. But I want to go to not her funeral, but the 40th day of her death, which is marked by a ceremony in Shia Islam. And to show you something again of the uses of poetry in times like that. I must have had this in my mind, because even though it's not in this recording, there is a line in this song that I had not heard since I was 7 or 8, and it's in a language that in a dialect that I don't quite speak, but there is a line that must have etched itself in my mind, which says, "Carry my body slowly so my mother can see me." And the poem that follows is not for Nika, it's for somebody else in that environment. But it was written at that very time, and certainly after being taken by this. You are lying there, stretched as long as a road. It's another good trick to make the morning new. They must take your hands, your feet, and bear your weight past all the buildings you tried for years to shake down for a laugh. By the smile on your face, you must be enjoying this. Carry him slowly when you go by his house, so his mother can see him and say, "I forgive the debt of milk, but forgive nothing else. For once you are a burden made only of yourself and not of minds trying to fix you in place." It's nowhere strange they take you now. You live there, remember? Used to say, "The police never visit, neighbors never pry, and when I fill my syringe, it glows in the dark." Layla had said he would die for a good joke. Ahmed had warned he will die for nothing and break all our hearts. But no one could guess he would make a shield between strangers and the darkness that gathers in a gun. Carry him slowly when you go by his friends, so the dogs in our blood have time to howl. Do not wrap his body, do not press him down with stones he did not love. Any day now, he might have enough of the earth and seek for the sun. If I think of you, I will lose you again. Stay there, high in the mountains, whence water flows. You are not afraid, don't fear for us then. I will not call you, not even as a shield in the wind blowing back, the never falling snow. Now, this poem is from the book, and it was written for the same person who is at the core of what I just read. The friend. It takes its rhythm and to some extent its refrain from a poem by the revolutionary poet Khosrow Golsorkhi, who I always forget died very young. He was only 30 years old. He was killed, executed by the previous regime. And he was a friend of my father's. And the line from the poem says, "I'm firewood, my good brother, break me, burn me for the cold oven of your house." If I could only furrow the ocean, if I could only plant these lines in the hollow of its wounded waves, if only. Drown me, my sweet brother, it's time. If I were a painted thing on a wall, if I could only be the same constant offering until erasure, if only. Hang me, my sweet brother, it's time. To be an armor, the plow they beat into a sword. If only I could be the dust you throw in the eyes of a foe, if only. Draw me, my sweet brother, it's time. Well, it's time, my sweet brother. I hear you are cold. If only I were firewood, I would flare hotter than rage in a poor father. If only. Burn me, my sweet brother. It's time. If only I only could, only if only if only if I could, only I could only if I only if I could, brother, if it's time. This is before all this. This is December 27th, 2017. Vida Mowahed, a woman nobody in the public knew, climbed on top of a utility box on Revolution Street, of all places. She took off her scarf, tied it to a stick, and started waving it over the heads of the crowd. You will see the reactions of the people. Some cheered, some stood and stared, some and most just walked by. She was brought down forcefully and was condemned to 3 years in prison. She has not appeared in public since. But here in this moment, that is not a revolutionary moment. Something is happening on which everything that will come depends. Two of the poems in the collection in some way refer to her, one very overtly, and I won't read it now in interest of time, and also because it's so closely about her that it would just not do. But I will read another one that's in which she appears as a shadow, as a thought that I had in mind. Sorry, there we go. And it's called The Angels. It's the penultimate poem of the collection. And It has a reference to the quote by Saint Paul, "Know ye not that we shall judge angels? In the judgment, the angels called our bluff. You sang and God came out shaking her stuff. From the rough city up rises a wave, whets the appetite, then tumbles to the rough. Hosannas, you cops who chase the lovers off from deep Los Angeles to the Mount of Kaf. Death found me famished, suckled me, and then said, go back to work now. You have loved enough. Houman called you joy, but the name did not catch. You burn like a candle, then the sun whispers, huff. How the city nestles like a cloud around your neck. Sleep, volcano, and wake up long enough. I'll end with one last poem. It was written before all of this. It's one of the first probably that I wrote. It was written appropriately, partly in Tehran, partly in the United States, partly in Farsi, partly in English, and I couldn't reconcile it, and I couldn't include it in the collection. And I could only understand it, I don't think I quite understand it, but I could gather it in that month of September. Tired city, how sweetly you comb your streets in rain. How slowly you wash your stone heart in autumn. Do not shed more blood to polish your walls. When it woke up, it was already rooted in you, this wild hyacinth, frostbitten and brilliant. Thank you if you have stayed with it this long.
Yeah, I would say thank you, Houman. That was great. And it's difficult to understand where to begin because in so many ways, I think that, I was having these questions about, I guess, like time, speaking about what the revolutionary times and what an unrevolutionary time is, and how these mesh or they don't, and how also poetry or language itself, like the enunciation, kind of make like the bridge between those two. So I was thinking a little bit at some point of kind of an asynchronous notion, like when I first heard like the Unrevolutionary Times title, I guess I was thinking of this sense as like the very first poem that you read, like this sense of revolution is kind of being exhausted, or it became really old. But then you turn it into this consumption, and you said like the word consumption, that you were consumed by the times. So I was, I don't think it's a question as such, but I was thinking very much on this, flexibility of time, what a moment is, and where if it's a revolution or unrevolution moment, and the role that the words, the enunciation of these moments kind of play a role in those times.
It's a maze through which you are at least I am navigating my way, but I think many people are. And when it's a maze in the sense that every maze has an exit. There is this constant and futile back and forth that occurs. For example, when academics sit around and talk about, how to change social structures, etc. In my own field of education, for example, where they have been trying to figure out for such a long time, how do we fix this? And generations of humans go through this process that's like a machine that crushes them, and it's by miracle. If anybody survives as a lover or as a person of hope or as a person of faith through this process, it's a real miracle. It's such a miracle that if they really survive, society sometimes chooses to give them a job. And it says that in the poem, the people around you conspire to give you a job. They call you an artist. And that's as a sign of your survival. And in a sense, they're saying you have survived, your soul or your heart has survived on behalf of all of us. If we look at it with very generous eyes, if we take some of the economic factors and the whole academic and gallery game that by necessity comes and cannibalizes this effort, we can see in the adoration of the artist a kind of broken-hearted adoration of one's own spiritual demise. Now, at the same time, if that survival can in some way be accounted for, it means that something of the way out, something of the transformation, something of a life that does not constantly condemn people to indignity, survives in some way within all of us at different levels of intensity and vibration and actuality. The searching for figures is just a search for the signs of that asynchronous element, that element of the transformation that is not yet come, but whose promise somehow has survived. It has survived because an ancestor saw something and recorded it. It has survived in a song. It has survived in an act, like the Vida Muvahed's act that I put forward. That one looks at the way one would have looked at a religious icon to some extent, and it has something of that process. But the problem now is that when this asynchronous element of hope and of transformation, of survival of the heart, whatever we want to call it, when it manifests, it doesn't manifest in this kind of clean, neat way. Christianity has, in some way, Christian theology has, and Buddhist theology as well, has made this really neat. They have taken two figures, really washed them clean by destroying pretty much any text that described their complexity, the figure of Jesus and the figure of Buddha. By destroying that complexity, they have managed to create a sense of the uniqueness of the figure. And very often one's job turns out to be, at least it turned out to be for me at a moment, but it's the same when you go and look for a new artist that can do, a new poet, a new philosopher, a new revolutionary, and a new activist, or somebody on the street that looks different and does, and that difference inspires something. In all of that, you're looking for the specificity of the human being within which this other thing manifests. And when it manifests, that's what it is. It looks like Vida Muwahed. It looks like that dervish. It looks like that traveler that's a little bit dirty. You don't quite trust him. You can't quite love him. You have all kinds of feelings towards him. That's how I see what I'm of course just you didn't ask a question, so I'm not giving an answer. I'm just continuing from what you said.
No, I think it's quite appropriate, because at some point I was thinking not of the word asynchronous, but a certain sense of super synchronicity. How these specificities of characters, of the figures, of persons, kind of can be an expression of great complexity, but in this reduced, just one body, just a certain amount of time, and it kind of conforms a certain complexity. And I was thinking of that idea of the super synchronicity, like all of these tensions kind of coalesce, in this person, moment, instant, and all of these underlying currents of how to guard us from extinction, guard us from losing these humane, qualities, if we can speak of those. Kind of coalesce and get synchronized in that person body moment. So that was kind of my thought, and still is not a question, but I don't know how to follow up on that. I know that there's one question here. I don't know who made it.
I will say something about what you just said.
Please.
Now, I said this thing about Christianity and Buddhism and how they deal with that promise, and by creating this thing that might even seem superhuman, until you get to like real small moments. There is a moment in the New Testament when Christ is drawing with his finger in the sand. And I don't know how they managed to not sanitize this one. He's doodling because he doesn't know what to say. It's the moment in which they're about to stone this woman according to the law, and he's stuck. He doesn't quite know what to do. And that's when he goes through this whole thing of let he who is without sin throw the first stone, etc., which is a risk that he takes with everybody who is there. But a more modern and very compassionate attempt at looking at what these, what it would be like to identify what I'm calling figures, who are embodiments of this promise, is, I read it recently and I highly recommend it, is Les Misérables, Victor Hugo. Now we all think we know what this story is about, Jean Valjean, or then Cosette and Marius, and most of us have seen some version of this. The version that we have in our mind is the opposite of Victor Hugo wrote. What Victor Hugo wrote. The book is this thick, and I would say 2/3 of it is no story at all. It's historical descriptions, and it's historical descriptions of France The time of the revolution has passed. There are very few revolutionaries. It's Napoleon has come and gone, and we are in the aftermath of that. We are not yet in the 1840s and in the 1850s, in the great rebellions of 1840. We're not at a time when Louis Napoleon has come and completely eradicated all political hope in France. And he goes on to describe all of these figures at great length outside of the process of the story. The bishop, Napoleon, the king, the cop, Javert, the criminal, Thénardier, the prostitute. And in all of these figures are given great compassion. Even Thénardier, as dirty as he is, as much as you hate him, in a sense you will find out at some point that there is actually something in him, that moves. He's very, very dangerous figure, but there's something in him. The only figures, they're not even figures. The only characters to whom he can't afford this are actually Marius and Cosette, the two young, whatever. They're the ones who eventually will kill Jean Valjean, who's an embodiment of a certain power embodied in the work, that's in the workers, in the body of the workers. It's somebody who's, in a sense, a worker. He's also an entrepreneur. He's also something of a mayor. He's also something of a monk. He traverses the entirety of this social system within himself. Cosette and Marius, the only virtues that they have is that they dress nice and they fall in love, and they're basically hipsters, and they end up killing Jean Valjean. He hates them. Victor Hugo hates them. Now imagine this story is taken to Broadway or taken to Hollywood, and it becomes a love story. Mm-hmm. And all those other figures become like these marginal little things that are happening. In that tension, that's the view of somebody with a great deal of compassion for what he cannot stomach. And there's another compassion in Hollywood and on Broadway, which is the compassion of wanting to make everything stomachable. And therefore, the lowliest of people can become the sites of fascination. It can become the site of like great importance. Oh, this love affair between, this pretty boy and this pretty girl. This story repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats. The hard work of most of us very often is to navigate these two poles. The pole that's represented in somebody like Victor Hugo, who is himself a force that draws an entirety of a nation in a direction, and then the force of the boy meets girl and the hipsters and the whatever. They're present just as much in me. I don't put myself on the side of Victor Hugo. I'm a lot closer to Cosette and Marius, in the realities of my life, probably.
Yeah.
All right. We have a question, or
no, and I think that also you made that clear at the very beginning with the title itself, and the very first poem, like it's made clear how we are slowly but surely given, or fulfilling a certain place that definitely goes as far away as revolution as it can.
Oh yes, I'm as degraded as anybody.
So the question here was like, what is your writing process like? Do you write at the same time every day, or do you write in response to something?
Oh, that's a question. That's a question from a coworker. Well, my writing process is such that it should give you hope in whatever writing process you have. I'm very often like the guy who found a button on the street and went to a tailor and said, can you make a coat for this? Can you put a coat on this one? And that's very often how it works. What I get through a very disciplined process of searching is a lot of buttons, and they are all over my desks and my drawers and my pockets. They're constantly there, and I'm constantly playing with them. And this constant playing with these buttons, of course, destroys the disciplined way of sitting down and creating a coat. What happens is that I find a tailor, or I find whatever you want to call it. I find somebody or something, some situation or event who brings out in me the desire to complete this object, and that's very sporadic in a sense. I don't know how I have survived in academia as long as I have. It's it must be because I'm a very good thief, or very good at convincing people. But the discipline part is the searching and being open to finding the odd shape. That's constant. It never leaves. It's never over. From the moment I wake up to within the sleep, in fact, actually. And right now, for example, I have a newborn. My first and probably only child, since I'm ancient now, and the engagement with this being, sort of monstrous creature who overthrows me emotionally. And when you're old, you have a tremendous amount of patience and goodwill towards people, because you're not missing out on anything. If the baby wants to cry, that's just a good time. It's probably better than going to the theater. But that engagement gives rise to all of these buttons, all of these bits that I'm constantly carrying with me. And then somebody, a student, says something, or a friend says something, or says, can you write this out? Can you, I bring it up and they say, can you do it? And I very often write these as letters, as love letters, in a sense, to a student or to a friend or to the dead, or some, the demand must come. I really am amazed. I'm really amazed. So they're geniuses, and I'm not at all anywhere in that arena. And these are people from whom things flow. Whatever is happening in their time and their culture, it's just goes through them and comes out with overwhelming force. That's a particular disposition, which is very, very rare. The rest of us, we have to work hard at this stuff. And I'm amazed by people who are not geniuses, and yet they have a regular production, especially at times like this, when, I wrote this book. How many books of poetry do you think came out in the United States or in the English-speaking world over the same time? Practically every person who is in a literature department and who happens to teach poetry has to also publish some poems. And it's not difficult. Poetry is not does not take tremendous talent to do, to do well. Extraordinary poetry, I don't know what that is. That must take a lot of talent. But anybody who's not damaged beyond human recognition can produce something. People who produce and produce and produce without somebody who's at the end of the address, without anybody to read, all these academics who write, a ton, all these artists who produce for the goddamn gallery, for a few people to come and see, they're extraordinary. And I have a real humble admiration for them, for surviving that, because I can't. I really need somebody to be out there who wants to hear this from me. And so that's very often is the form, except for very rarely, very, very rarely, it's late at night. And I think of, like Leonard Cohen said, of somebody like me on a night like this. And then I can project myself a little bit into the future, and then the night is over. Then the night is ruined, because you stay up all night and you write, and you're left with 4,000, 5,000 words in the morning that you can do something with. I hope that gives that gives people, I don't know, it's not going to give courage, but I think it gives anybody who's not producing constantly some solace. I think if you're not producing constantly, there's nothing wrong with you, or at least that's what I tell myself. I think you're just waiting for the recipient. And maybe the better idea for a writer would be to go and find those recipients.
Yeah, no, I had like this note, and I was thinking about, and I think I mentioned this already before, but now I'm rethinking, that has to do with the allowing tensions to make ourselves vulnerable, like these tensions in between, the sense of the revolution or unrevolution, the sense of how you feel towards the consumption of yourself by an image or an event. But yeah, it's like the tensions do not happen only within ourselves, but those tensions are like, vulnerable to our own selves. Or maybe we can, and there are some parts of us that we can enter into, a tense relationship of vulnerability. But most than anything, I think it's a tension that goes beyond our own selves, and it's connected to others, and it's connected to others through time as well. Like either for the future or for tensions that go like to the past. I don't want to say death towards the being, but yeah, kind of to an extent.
A completion that was promised and never occurred in some sense. I remember I was sitting down to write something. I don't know if he has any cachet anymore, but John Berger, was one of, he was somebody who would create constantly. And one of the reasons for that was that he always knew who he was addressing his work to. And when he couldn't find anybody, he would address it to the dead. He has an extraordinary book. It's called Here's Where We Meet, where the beloved dead of his life arise and meet him in cities that they never necessarily visited or knew, but that the cities that he thinks they would have gone to in their death. So, for example, his mother goes to Lisbon. She never in her life, she never visited Lisbon, but it's in Lisbon that he meets her. And the teacher from childhood is in Krakow in Poland. where he meets him, etc. But there was something that always bothered me, I think, in the way they address, and in the way his addressees returned his affections or his entreaties.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I wrote, and there's a version of that was published as such, was in some way an attempt after he died to give him what I felt like was not given to him. And so I was trying to do something with him, for him, at a moment that he least expected it, actually. In the Jewish tradition, they say that the highest mitzvah, the highest act of virtue, is one that is performed for the dead, because they do not return the favor. They have no opportunity of ever returning the favor to you. And so whatever it is that you can do for the dead, not for the survivors, not for the family of the dead, but for the dead, not for John Berger's fans, but for him in his demise, that is the highest virtue. And from that attempt to do that for him came the basis of another project that took on a life of its own and was living. It still is alive, and it took a couple of years. I was lost in it. I couldn't finish it. I didn't know what to do with it. And then I remembered its origin. I remembered that it had come out of this gift to the lost, this gift that would be lost and is to the lost. And once I remembered that, I could finish it. I could continue because it had found its proper place. No, I really do think it is to the dead. It is. It's the only way, and I think it's in the communication with the dead is when we, and it's amazing that it's in part Western culture has so emptied itself of this aspect that was known on this continent, and particularly where you are right now was understood with a great deal of clarity.
Yep.
It's in that communication with the dead that's what I was calling the artistic process, which is the bearing witness to the survival of the heart and the soul in conditions in which that survival is almost impossible.
Yeah. No. You just reminded me of a very dear friend of mine and teacher. He passed away a few years. American poet from the West Coast, Kevin Killian. But he used to go to the tomb. Well, not the tomb, but it's a crypt where they have the urn of the ashes of Jack Spicer, a poet that he never knew, but he was very inspired by him. And he would go and read poems to Jack Spicer on a specific date. I don't know if it was like the Jack Spicer's birthday or the day he died. He passed away, and he would go every year and do this, like reading aloud poetry, the poems that Jack Spicer wrote, and some others to the dead. And now he passed away, and a whole community of friends kind of afforded the possibility for him to be, put just a few meters away, and now people continue to go and keep the enunciation of the poems, and now two poets ongoing, and I think and I think it's coming from a very, very different tradition, or but this sense you know, like the character of him. I don't want to overstep in generalizations, but the character of him was, I would say, far away from being a believer or, you know, a religious person. But nonetheless, there was something, you know, deep inside that, you know, would move him. And I don't know if it was the words itself, you know, like the poems of, you know, a dead person talking to you or to him in that specific case, or if it was like his own intuition and belief in that was what needed to be done, you know, that was part of his job as a poet, writer, and you know, this one of the examples of, you know, the survivors of, you know, with a certain degree of humanity over past certain age, and yeah, yeah. So to me it just resounded, I would say, far more true. I don't know if because I have like the connection to the, you know, to this anecdote, and it's not an anecdote, it's a person, but yeah, it resounds quite true, you know. So yeah, I guess we're on the time zone of the Zoom YouTube mood. And I have a bunch of notes still, and I wish we can keep on talking at some point, and I know we will. But I wanted to thank you for this time and the generosity of your voice and words.
The generosity is yours. I just regret not being there.
Yeah,
with all of you, because the only way to recover from a poetry reading, which is one of the worst things that can happen to you, is to really drink some.
Yeah, no, I think the mezcal should counter.
This is what I was thinking, and I believe that we should. I think my honorarium should go to buying some more bottles of mezcal to just make up for what we just did. And in fact, I insist.
Thank you for your generosity. Then I think the rabbit hole
just atoning for sins.
The rabbit hole has a very happy ending, and you know, we find a pot of mezcal. Perfect. Thank you so much, Houman.
Thank you for everything and for your trust.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Take care, my friend.
Go home safely.
Pues gracias por acompañarnos a este miércoles de SOMA. La próxima semana tendremos a Reza Negarestani, quien será el segundo participante o invitado del SOMA Summer de este año. Entonces, acompáñanos el próximo miércoles con Reza Negarestani. Gracias por la atención y nos vemos el próximo miércoles. Muchísimas gracias.